Well, hello everybody, I'm L.A. Little and this is your weekly NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets. We do it from a neoclassical perspective each time, asking ourselves what happened last week. What does it tell us about the coming ones? We do this show every Sunday evening live, or actually broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's under the channel L.A. Little. If you subscribe, you'll get content notification anytime I push content to the site. As far as these markets and what happened, here's the wrap for last week. We actually had a positive week. Dow was the trailer, coming up 0.6. A lot of that is Apple struggling. But the small caps and the NASDAQ were leading on the way up, and that is actually what you would like to see. If we move over to look at these indexes, we'll start with the S&P 500 and what's going on there. And what happened on Friday, of course, was quad witching, so we had volume come in. It was an inside day, so that really doesn't tell us anything. The thing that we know is that we were coming up to do a full retest regen off this prior swing point low. We tested it on Thursday, tested again Friday morning, then fell back. So in some sense, that's kind of disappointing, but that's only in this index and it's only on that time frame. If we bring it back, we look at it on a weekly time frame. What we're doing there is we're coming right back to the top of the range and we're attacking it with volume. So, when you look at it on a weekly, it's not so bad, but you are at the top of the range. If you're going to fail, this is where you probably will do so. Moving over to the NASDAQ, which actually had the strength along with the Russell, you have the same thing, big volume on Friday. Also the same in that this was inside day, so it doesn't really tell you much. If it continues to come off and volume were to be heavy, then it might say something, but really, given the way this transpired, it really doesn't say much at all. What does say something is that this thing has already immediately came back to do a bullish retest regen. And if you look at it, you've got the overlap here. That's probably where it should hold, but it could do a full retest, which would be all the way back down to the bottom. So on the NASDAQ, it's positive in that it broke out, right, got higher. It's negative in that it came back. It comes back with heavier volume, but I'm kind of discounting that, given that it was an inside day. But it is coming back to do a bullish retest regen. If we pop over to the weekly, here we actually have a little bit of a negative. And that negative is that if you look at this, what you essentially have is you have a breakout over the highs. So this high, it gets over it. Can't stay over it though, comes back underneath it, closes under it, so that's a test failure at the highs. That's typically not a good thing. The fact that you did less volume, especially dramatically less volume, kind of suggests that that probably isn't going to succeed, and so that has to be viewed as a negative on the longer term time frame. NDX, kind of the same picture, doesn't get over, has big volume, it is weaker. A lot of that has to do with Apple. If we look at the Russell, now the Russell actually is a different story. And the Russell actually has been giving us the best signals again, which it did last year about this time frame through the rest of the year. Russell is saying, hey, I got over the top, and yeah, I had suspect volume. In other words, my volume here wasn't as big as my volume over here. So that's why you get the red arrow versus the green. Suspect, but it held, right? It was an inside day. Volume expands, that's good. Holds at the highs, over the highs, breakout. And not only does it hold on that time frame, but it holds on the weekly. So you've got divergence. And we've seen divergence and mixed signals now for probably the better part of about 4 months. And they haven't changed. So you've got some signals arguing like this, that hey, we can go higher. And you've got some like the NASDAQ saying that it's going to be tougher. And then you've got the S&P that hasn't even gotten over the bearish retest regen. If you factor in on all of these, if you factor in the idea that the trend is higher, which it is, on the longer term time frames, then you have to assume that unless there's evidence, significant evidence to suggest that it's not going higher, you have to assume it's going to go higher. And so right now, that is the assumption. And so I think you have to lead with the bias that this market is going to try and push higher. What do the world markets say? When we come back, we'll take a look at that and see what that tells us.
At TA Today, we have many services that teach trading to our clients. You can use LA's tools to trade and/or learn how to trade alongside LA using his neoclassical methodology. To earn these free services with no subscription or charge, go to our homepage, click on either the tools and earn free services or trade with LA and earn free services. On this page, you can refer a friend. Fill out information about yourself and the friend you are referring, and you will earn up to 3 months of free service with no charge as long as your friend continues to be a subscriber. So remember, refer one friend and earn up to 3 months of free service with us. The more people you refer that sign up, the more months you earn. If you have any questions, let us know. Thanks from the TA Today team, bringing you tools and ideas to help you trade.
All right, as we come back here, the action has mostly been in Europe. We've seen some action also in Asia. We'll talk about that next. But as far as what's moving the U.S. markets, it's really Europe. And of course, it has to do with Greece and what's happening in Greece and so forth. So let's just review where we are on those markets. The Greek situation is going to come to a head this week. And that's really going to be the real test, is what happens, as a result of the Greek situation. Now, if we look at the CACs, and I've got it on the daily time frame, when we made a lower low here on this red bar, in other words, we broke underneath this swing point low, that turned us to a suspect bullish, or actually it reconfirmed a suspect bullish move. And when we got underneath it, the next bounce back up is that bearish retest regen. And what did it do? Well, it came back to the high of the swing point lows bar. That was right here where it closed, right, that price point. And it also made it all the way up to the other high of the swing point low, which is actually what you would kind of expect, right? That's where the natural selling should come in. That is where it came in. It closed there and then, of course, regenerated lower, or at least attempted to. So far, it has been unable to fulfill that regeneration attempt, because what would that be? Well, you would actually take this, bring it back up. Actually, it just about finished it, if not. It was very close, if not finished. It looks like it actually finished. So you got the regeneration lower. So now what happens? You break underneath this low, but it's not a swing point low because it didn't last 6 bars. So your retest regen still is the harder one, the bearish one is still is the harder one, and it's back up here. And what is it doing? It's coming right back up to that, and that's where they sold it again on Friday. But you hit it with more volume as a result of the Friday behavior of the U.S. markets for whatever reason, and maybe there's I don't know enough about it to know, but maybe there's quad witching over there as well, options expirations that are causing these volume spikes that are synchronized with ours. But I do see volume spikes there as I see them here on our big quad witching, triple witching days. Gets back up, comes into the low. That looks to me like it's going to try to attack it again. So that's the daily. If we go to the weekly also has a couple signals that suggest that it's going to try to turn as well. One of them is the fact that it's coming back into this high of this high volume bar here. It's a wide price spread, high volume bar. Those are pretty important. So as it comes back into that area, it didn't quite get to it, got close. As it comes back into that area, it doesn't have the volume, even though volume is escalating as it comes down. The other piece of that is you're getting long tails on these. That says, hey, as you get lower and lower prices, the sellers are less willing to sell. That's how you get this kind of a battleground where price ends up lower but closes back towards the middle or higher. So That all to me suggests that more than likely these markets are going to try to push higher. And if we're looking at it on the weekly and saying, okay, the weekly is going to try to push higher, where is that to? Well, the retest regen is off the prior swing point low that was broken. That was broken here this week. The push back up would be almost to the 5,000 area, right at the 5,000, because I believe that's the top of this bar, 5,358. So that's what the weekly looks like. That's what the CAX looks like. Now the DAX looks almost the same. It's just been a little bit weaker. It also did exactly the same sort of thing with the retest regen here and the other one there, right? It does the same sort of thing. Although in its case, it's been weaker. It only goes into the intersection of those two, regenerates lower, and on its regeneration lower, it does not regenerate fully. Back up, volume expands. Again, this looks to me like it's going to come back in here, try to test again, and maybe make it back to this area. If you look at it on a weekly basis, same sort of thing, long tails, volume pushing down, but still not enough volume compared to what it's trying to come back into. So exactly the same sort of situation. If we go, so Europe, of course, is all about Greece. What's going to happen with Greece this week? There's some speculation that that they will not find a resolution, and there of course is speculation that they will. Clearly the markets haven't discounted a deal. If the deal is made, these markets are going to pop and pop pretty good. If we go over to Asia now, Shanghai, I've been talking about this market was setting up a range trade, and it looked to me like this bar was the bar. At the time, it got barely over it and then finally gave it up, and then it came off with some force, about 13-14%. That doesn't look like much, but it's a fairly large percentage-wise. The one thing I would note here is that even though it's coming down, the escalation in price is not matched by an escalation in volume. So in other words, we don't see volume expanding as it's coming down. And there are different people say different things. My take when you see that is there's less and less sellers willing to sell on the way down. To me, that's bullish. If I look at the prior swing point high, it's a bullish retest regen. It's already happened once. It's coming to do it again. The other thing that I would note here that's a kind of a bearish thing is that you've got swing point lows all kind of lined up together. Now, that's bearish if you start breaking them. You've already came down 14%. I suspect what you're going to see, now China's off tomorrow, so we won't see anything tomorrow, but I suspect what you're going to see is some sort of a bounce, maybe a small one. If it is, that's kind of a danger trade. If you get the heavier one up to here, then you get a larger ABCD structure, or I mean a smaller one. If you get the small one right, then it's a larger ABCD structure to take you down. So the bounce is going to be key in this market as it unfolds, because the bounce is going to tell you what that larger range potentially is going to look at. My suspicion is this is a range trade, and the reason for that is you've had a huge run in terms of percentages. Even this year you've had a huge run. You've basically gone, let me find the beginning of the year, it would be here, so you've gone from 31, looks like about 3160 all the way up to 5,000. Right? That is a huge run. Actually not 5,000, but 5,100. That is a huge run, and that sort of a run can lead to a fairly large range when it unfolds. And so you can see this thing's come off big, and I'm sure there's some people freaking out about it. And so the question now is, okay, are they going to buy and make this the range, right? And then potentially you get other ranges on the way down underneath it. Or are they going to extend it farther and potentially, and let me use a different color, are they extend it farther, right, to where that range actually ends up being that big to start with, right? They both equal out about the same. It's just a question of, is this the bottom of the range, or is it going to be down farther before it gets to bounce? That's the question. It is going to bounce off of one of those two levels. It could be from right here, and it may be from later. All of that is in the context of what? A market that's quite bullish, right? That hasn't changed. It's just that it's gone too far, too fast, without any kind of real break. You had one little consolidation in here, and then another big move, another little bitty consolidation, another move. Now you're coming back This is the natural place to see buyers step in again, and then eventually potentially trade down even deeper to create a very large range, which for a trader is good. For an investor is probably a little bit of heartburn. That's China. If we look at Japan, Japan also trading in a range. If we look at it on the weekly, you can see the range is starting to develop off these high volume bars. I would expect this range probably to expand as well. And if we look at Hong Kong, Hong Kong also has a range trade going on, and Hong Kong did make it back into that area that I had been talking about for some time, right? Came right back into that area. That to me is probably the buy area on the first part of the range. Elsewhere, India's getting a decent bounce. I saw Toronto sold off pretty hard, and that is not the CACs. Let me go get Toronto market. Bear with me just a second. Let me find it. And here we go, Toronto. So Toronto sells off, volume pretty heavy. Again, this is partly off of us, but gets under the swing point low, does it with volume. That one is going to try to trade back into these big bars I've been talking about for quite some time. 14.53, so almost there. Got to 14.58. And the only other one worth mentioning probably is Taipei. Taipei is still struggling, and you can see it on the weekly and on the daily. Elsewhere, not that much happened. Bonds held up. The dollar is towards the bottom of its range. Euro is trying to break out. We probably should look at the euro right quick because currencies definitely could be a factor, and it certainly could be a factor off of whatever happens in Greece. And so if I pull those markets up, here's the FXE. It's coming to the top of the range. It's trying to trade up there again at the top. If it breaks over this, I've advertised this for about 3-4 weeks now. If it breaks over this area, this is a little ABCD structure, to the upside, that it take it back into that 119 area, which was the retest regen on the monthly. So what do I think about everything? Well, it looks to me like they're going to try to push it higher again overall. But it does look like it's going to be another choppy week, and I suspect it's going to be all off of what happens in Greece, because if you look over at the economics, there's not a lot of data this week. There are some PMIs. If you look at the earnings, there's really nothing much in the way of earnings for another 2 or 3 weeks. And if you just look at the news flow is pretty negative. So it's going to be a choppy week. But if they do reach any kind of resolution, I expect this market's going to try to pop in Europe, which will also help the U.S. markets. So that's kind of where it's at. As always, I thank you for joining me. You have yourself a great night. Happy Father's Day to the fathers out there. Have yourself a great one, and I'll see you next time. Good night.